All right, welcome back to another investing video. Hope you all are doing well. So it was a good week in investing. Return has been solid. I did a little bit of playing around with some of the options. Removed all the short options. Were totally long. So in there, what do we got in there? Number of options. Um, $53,000 worth of options. That's pretty nice. Basically that's, $53,000 in cash for free that, if I carry it all the way, that's free money basically. Obviously, I'm going low at 16.16. With the options being, they're now about 430-ish, the options, the basis, yeah, that's well over, it's about, $20.50. The reason it's a little lower is I did some trading off the options. So what I did was, uh, we had a little bit of slumping. It was down to around 16-ish, low 16s. I sold a bunch of the options back, bought short options. So I made, off of those, I realized about uh, 2,800, selling those back. Bought short options, which then, as it increased, I rolled back into the long options. Did lose, technically realized about a $600 loss rolling into the long options, but in aggregate, obviously, it's a much pretty big gain. Although, the realization, that I realized probably technically on paper, I realized about 2,200 in profits, but it's kind of a little bit, um, maybe a little less than that, because what happens is that as I bought those long options back, the cost basis is now lower. So, I mean, I guess that means that the longer term potential is a little bit lower. But obviously we're at a lot more long options, a huge amount more money, um, and that also reflects very well in the cash, which is now only 101. And then you see the dividend receivable over 9,000. I think they're going to be the withholding in there. Originally, it was showing, I think, without the withholding. Now I believe it's displaying, um, or originally I think it was showing with withholding not included. Now it's showing the total aggregate, and then the withholding will come out later, which makes sense financially, really. But even still, you think about that, it's going to drive this into the um, lowish 90,000 range with the amount of equity we got in here. On Zim alone, we've got 207, market value of 217. We've got almost 21,000 in NLY, and then we've got a few other positions in the 2,000 range. So I mean that margin is actually pretty low. I mean the big thing though is the index. The Shanghai index is, it's a little more obscure, not quite as used, but I like it. But it shows some of the price action. Drewry's came out with another index. A few days later, had a 41% spike in prices. This one's a little bit more used, but you can see, that's one of the final slides. But you can see the spike that takes it. I mean that big kind of mound between 10 27 2024 and I'll just say 12/24 of 2024. That's kind of what's falling into that first quarter numbers. So you can see where we spiked to is already sort of mid-range on there. So depending where we go, how long we hold, again, that could very easily mimic another 74%, 74% dividend. Hopefully, it continues to move higher. That big spike up there where you're seeing, from earlier on, the 3.7 to around 8.30. That's the one that was producing two dividends of over $3. So it was about like 650 in dividends total. That huge hump that went, from 4,000 to 6,000. So it would be really really nice if we just push through that 4,000, even up to that 6,000, that sort of thing would blast off easily a $3 dividend. Um, but kind of depends. I mean, we're definitely in um, winding up to at least get another, um, sort of ish 74, cent dividend, which would put us on track easily for $3 to $4 for the year. I mean, if we continue to push through to that 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 range, then we could easily be pushing $5, $6 in dividends on the year. So I mean, it's hard to know, but everything is looking extremely positive. So see where we go. Obviously, this is kind of a 2-year-ish cycle. I mean, I guess it's more like 1.5. But yeah, it's like a 1.5-year cycle with these options, and then depending how it's looking, may see if I want to roll them or not, or just let them get called, or if we're coming out of the cycle, then it's just going to be expiring worthless. But I feel very very strong on this, so it's looking positive. I don't know. I might take a break, for a couple months from this. Not because I'm not committed to it. I am committed to it, but I just don't know if there's going to be a whole lot interesting. I mean, depending, if we start to get really, really nice on the index, that could be something worth talking about. But um, just kind of how long it takes to develop, it may not be worth making a whole lot of videos. To do, a little trading. I told you the options, how I played around with that. And that definitely helps the bottom line. I mean, it was very additive because I'm, selling those options at about 380, or buying them back at 380, and then I was reselling them above 4. So that it's not huge, but it is huge, and then that I got everything locked in really good and low, or long, that really keeps the margin down. And then that's just a huge chunk of cash. What did I say, 53,000? I think. Yeah, $53,000 in options. That's just a ton of free money. I think I'm probably not going to play around with it too much. But maybe depending if we get in a slump somewhere, maybe I'll sell 20 of them back and see if I can play around with it a little more. But I did also do a little bit of range trading. It was bouncing quite a lot. So, you catch a low end of the bounce and sell to a higher end of the bounce. Didn't have good patience there, but did make a little bit. And then on Friday, I kind of got a low end of the bounce, and I just sold an option, which got called for 1,000 shares, but it was picked up about $70 on that. So the actual trading, the options was decent money. I don't really know. I would estimate like is over $500. I mean technically it's like 2,000, but on the other hand, it's like my long term, because the basis is a little bit lower now. Realistically, it's more like 500. It's just because I realized a lot of it, but my long term potential is tiny bit lower. On the option. Um, I mean, it's like sort of saying, I've got 53,000 in option. If I hadn't realized it all, it'd be like more like 54, 50. So obviously, I still did very well, but it's like that 2,000 is more like a $500 win. But even still, it's pretty big to pick up anything, especially when we're gonna get that. I mean, it's like gravy, because I mean the stock in itself, you're carrying the stock, you know, um, when this index is spiking, this is gonna full year. I think $3 is a very low ball estimate for the dividend. I'm thinking 4 to 5 is more reasonable full year. I mean, obviously that's including what we already had. But um, you know, if it spikes, depending how it spikes, um, we could see 6 plus, but I'm not I mean, the problem with that is the time frame is super short. I mean, I feel like we've got this 3 month window, and then it's just gonna really downturn heavily, I think. But I think the 3 month window, um, you see how steep that line is. It was a 41% increase on this week. How steep that is, that makes me think that we're going to get continued steep increases. So it's going to be a very narrow but very powerful window. My biggest concern, in my setup, is that they're going to call out a special dividend. But on the other hand, because special dividend is going to reduce the option price. I mean, it would still be a positive event, but it's less positive to me than they run their full year dividend policy. But on the other hand, I think that the index is going to be maybe downturning off that, so they may not want to pay out the special dividend because maybe the fourth quarter could be, fairly weak. Um, so that kind of goes against the special dividend, if they think that there's going to be a sag in the fourth quarter, because the only reason you even consider a special dividend is you also know the fourth quarter is going to be extremely strong. Whereas we could have extremely strong third quarter, but fourth quarter kind of weak, so you wouldn't want to declare a special dividend in the third quarter if fourth quarter might be shaky. Um, but we'll see what plays. It doesn't really entirely matter. I mean, it's just, it's much better for me where I am if they don't do any special dividends. But we'll just cross our fingers on that. I mean, it's one of those considerations that, you know, is there and is real. It's not going to terribly hurt me if they declare a special dividend, but it's more helpful if they don't. Um, so obviously, and that kind of included this summary of metrics. Market to market basically means that, the actual share value were a little bit better. Most of it is obviously are. I mean, if you look at the realized and unrealized, I think like basically sort of if you ran it that way, um, I've realized a lot of profit, but my unrealized has also increased. Um, but yeah, market to market basically means that share value is pretty consistent, about $2,000 positive actually. But big thing is the dividends have been 11,500. Um, yeah, obviously you got the interest and fees. You see, I'm paying quite a lot of interest and fees. But my trading, adds into quite a lot of fees, but that is profitable, so extremely profitable. So, I'm not worried about the fees. If I'm making, $70 on selling some options and they charge me $6 on it, I'm okay with it. I still pocketed 64 or something. Not sure the numbers I made up if that was correct, but you know what I mean. If I misspoke, I was just spitting out some numbers I think which were correct, but I'm not sure entirely. It was close to that anyway. But then the 6,200, I think that's the options. Well, this one's actually interesting because it doesn't show my dividends receivable in there. But that basically, means that with a dividends receivable, that'll be, close to $20,000 in dividends in here, plus the, $6,000 in profit of options. Obviously, we're carrying long term, we're going to have a huge spike because you really only realize it once the options are sold. So January 2027, that's going to be like realizing like $50,000 of options, unless I kind of spread it out. But that's another thing too, is also why I would kind of probably want this portfolio to not have any margin at that point, because once you realize $50,000, that's quite a lot of tax. So I might need to take a little bit out of this portfolio to pay for some of the tax. But we're doing very strong. So I'm extremely happy. We'll see if there are updates worth doing, but I'll do updates as they make sense. But I'm going to continue to do a little bit of trading, but there might not be anything to write home about, so to speak, just depending. So there may not be a whole lot of updates for a while, but I'm definitely committed to this. Just we'll see. I don't want to, run a weekly update just to run a weekly update if there's nothing to comment on, because it's going to be kind of a long haul with maybe not all interest every week. All right. Anyway, till next time, peeps.